Hello and welcome to CommunityForce training. This training session is going to be covering our scholarship and grants training session for today. And we're going to be talking about the administration dashboard. And so in this training session, the administration dashboard will go over all the information under that tab. Some of the items you as a user won't be using, but we will be covering some of the items that you will definitely want to know a little bit about. And then the other ones that you probably won't be using, we'll just kind of do a brief overview, letting you know at least what those are. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go to our site here. So to get started, of course, this training, as I mentioned earlier, is for our scholarship and grant users. We will be using the same training session, the scholarship site and the grant site. The administration tab is very similar. There's only maybe one or two items that are going to be a little different in comparison to the grant site and the scholarship site. So of course, if I come to any areas where you will see a little bit of a different screen, I will kind of go over those and show you what those differences are. So the administration dashboard, so as soon as you log into your site, on the home page here, you will see a tab at the top of the page called Administration. Now, the administration area is where we set up key settings that affect the entire site of your system. So this is where a lot of the settings that are preset based off of the onboarding application that you filled out, you like your theme or some of the specific settings that we want to set on your entire site, those are all located here in the administration dashboard. So more than likely you won't be in this dashboard too often, but you may need to occasionally make a few settings. So we do want to kind of just give you a brief overview of what the items located are here. So when you first come into the administration tab, the first area you're at is set up user accounts. So set up user accounts is where we've set up your reviewer accounts as well as any admin accounts. And then also you can see here, this is where you can also see your applicant accounts that have been created. So set up users is where all those user profiles are housed. And here in this functionality, you will see the applicants' names and their email addresses. So this is the email address and the names that they've created when they first logged in, as well as the type of role that they have. So you can see here the majority of these are applicants because applicants are the majority of the individuals coming into your site. And then this type column here, if you have integration with single sign-on, then this type column would have some effect. This would tell us where they're coming from. Are they coming directly from your site into the system, or are they logging in through the CommunityForce login page? So if you don't have integration with single sign-on, which you would know if you did, then this column here really doesn't have much meaning to you. It just kind of defaults to the items as things are created. And then the status column over here, this lets you know of these user accounts, which ones are active and which ones are not active. So if they say active, that means they can log in and it's an active account. If you come here and you see an inactive, that means that that's applicant or that user profile is no longer active in the system. They can't log in. But however, you do have the ability to activate an account if they ever decide to come back and need to be able to use that account. And then this little icon here is the edit icon, and then this trash can here is how you would delete a user profile. Now we want to really stress caution. If you delete a user profile of any kind, you delete all history associated with that user account. So when I mean history, I mean any applications they've created, if it's reviewers, any scores they created, that sort of thing. Anything that that individual has done and accessed on the site, scores, reports, applications, that will all be deleted if you delete their account. So that's where the inactive comes into play. So to inactivate an account, so if someone was to leave your organization and you no longer wanted them to have access, but you wanted to keep their information, then you would want to inactivate them. And to inactivate anything you want to do, you have these columns here where you would select that individual. You would come here select the name, and then come over here, and then you'll see over here more options. And then here's where you would make them active, and you select it, and you can see they're inactive. I can come over here, select it again, and now they're once again active. So that's how you can make someone active or inactive. There may be occasions where someone can't seem to get their password and they need you to reset it. Here in the more options, you do have the ability to reset them. You can come here, select them, hit more options, hit reset, and then it would send them notification in regards to how to reset their password. They would receive an email in regards to that process. And then again, here's the delete. This is for multiple deletions where you could select multiple and then delete. Again, delete them. You've deleted their applications. Reviewers, you've deleted all their scores that they've scored on any individual. And then of course you can see you can export this report to Excel. So that's some of the key edit functionality that you have here on Setup Users. You'll also notice you can create users from here by hitting the Create User button. And it's simply a matter of filling in the fields. Anything that has a red asterisk, of course, is the required fields. You must enter that information. Now on the scholarship site, you do have a date of birth. Organizations, you will not have that date of birth. However, organizations, when you create a user, you will notice that down here in the lower right-hand corner, you also have their organization name, and that's important in the system. And that's this organization here, not to be confused with the sponsoring org, but this is the company organization name here where you would enter that organization. So once you enter the information, then you come down here to role type. So the main role types you'll be working with, you have the reviewer, and then you also have applicants. Those are the two main ones that you'll be creating. The other ones are licensed users that we here at CommunityForce will more than likely be setting those up, like department admins, global admins. Those are ones that we would be creating for you. So of course, if you're creating a reviewer account, a reviewer is someone who is reviewing in the evaluation process of your scoring or rubrics or any type of review process where you have reviewers that you need to have those accounts. Those would be reviewers. And then applicants, of course, are any applicants coming into the site. If you needed to create accounts for them, you can do so through this Create Users. And then the sponsoring organization should just default to your organization. This is the sponsoring organization that's maintaining this account, not the organization on grant site. Do not get this organization confused with the actual organization that they're logging in with. This is that organization here. This is their login organization. Sponsoring organization is you. You're the organization sponsoring the site. Now you'll also see here you have an assigned password manually. So this assigned password manually, you can assign an individual a password. You can see once you type it, it doesn't show you what you're typing. So of course you would have to remember what it was that you gave them. However, what I like to do when I create a user account is I'll create their account, let the system assign a password, and within the system it automatically does that. When you hit save, you don't have to assign the password. And then I usually tell the individual, log in, use the email address that I've created on your account. I give them the email address, and then I tell them to click the forgot password. And then when they click that forgot password, the system will send them an email and they can create their own password that way. You don't have to remember that on their behalf. There is an authentication email that goes out that you can also say yes. And what that does is it notifies this individual if you have this turned on. So you might want to use caution if they don't know you're creating an account, because what this does, as soon as you click save, it sends an email to that individual notifying them that you've created an account on their behalf. If they don't know you're creating an account on their behalf, then they may contact you and may have some alarm by not knowing that. And then of course you can make it active, yes or no. And this is scholarship site, same. Grant site, same information. Okay. One difference on the grant site is, as a grant user, you have those organizations, and there is a there is another training session on managed members. And when managing members, that's where organizations have the ability to maintain user accounts for others within their organization. If someone is a primary user, then that primary user has access to everyone's accounts within that same organization. Now, you scholarship users, you do not use this. You do not have this primary user. This will not have any functionality on your site. You don't have that primary user functionality. If you notice here, it's not here. It's only on the grant site. And grant users, you would want to, if you want to know more about how to use this, you would want to make sure and review the video on manage members and changing of ownership, because that primary user comes into play on that managed members functionality and changing ownership. Okay, and then you also notice you have an import user here, and then once you create the account, of course, it's just a matter of clicking save, and then once you click save, that account will be here. So the main thing you want to make sure of is the type of account you're creating, that role that you're creating, and then getting the correct email address when you're creating those accounts, and then that's the main thing, that's the important thing. And of course, with grant users, you want to make sure you get that organization in there as well. Now there's an import user here, which you'll notice in this drop-down listing, there's an import user as well. And so this import user, what it does, and it's nice, what this does is instead of having to create a user one by one, you can actually get the an Excel spreadsheet. We provide the spreadsheet for you. And when you click this Excel, you'll notice it downloaded it. I can open up this Excel document. And then as soon as I open this Excel document, it's pre-populated with some samples. You can only do an import user for applicant types and reviewers. So that's what this is here. And if I minimize this, there are some rules that go along with this when you create this form. And these rules are right here in red. So it's telling you the role type column must have either applicant or reviewer. You cannot misspell those, so it's better to just cut and paste or drag it down. You do not want to have a typo, because it will not create that account. And then the other fields that or columns you must complete are the first name, the last name, the email address, and then of course the role type. And if you're using applicant ID, this is for integration. Some of you may have activated that external ID. You may see that in some of the trainings, that column that says external ID. This is used a lot of times with integration. And so if you aren't using the applicant ID, then you can leave that blank. I know it says it's required. It's required if you are using that with your integration, or if you are wanting to have the system maybe record an applicant ID that you keep outside of the system. Maybe you want to do an import of some kind or export of data and you want that applicant ID, then you can add that here as well. And then it will populate that when you do this import. And then it's just letting you know if you leave the password column blank, that the system's going to add a default password for that user. So that's that. Again, you can send them in when you notify them that the account's been created. You can then tell them to enter the email address that you gave them, that you've used for them, but then also use the forgot password, because the system will give them a password and it'll do something such as it'll take their first name column, their last name column, and then put 1, 2, 3, and that's the password it will create. But if you don't want to go through notifying them of that password, then you can leave this blank, or you can type a password in there as well if you wish. Then once you're done creating this document, you will want to save it on your local desktop. So I do File, and then you would just do a quick save. And then once you save it, I'm just going to save it quickly to my desktop here. Desktop, save. And then once you save it, you can come here and click Upload Excel File, select the file, and then locate the document you just saved, which is this one. And you'll notice it will download it. And then you just simply click save, and I'll probably get some errors here because I have a feeling those accounts already exist. So what it's telling me is it found 2 records already, which and then so it didn't create any records, but it updated records. Now this is another place where you want to use caution, because if you have someone who's an admin in the site and then you create this sheet and you add them to the sheet as a reviewer, it will overwrite their data and change them to reviewer. Same with applicants. If somebody's already an applicant and you make them a real reviewer, it's going to change their role type to reviewer. So that is something you want to use caution when you're adding individuals, is you first want to make sure they don't have accounts already, because then it will overwrite any data that was already in their account. And then also, just to reiterate, when creating accounts, the email address here, this is important to get that email address correct, because that is the email that the system is using to communicate with that individual. So if you don't get the correct email address, then they're not going to be receiving their emails, because that's the email the system uses. So that's the setup user functionalities, the setup user accounts, and the import user accounts. The sponsoring organization, I'll just quickly touch on that. This is something we preset for you. This is your organization. If you have multiple departments, multiple applications that you need to divide out by departments, or you have multiple organizations and you want to keep their applications and their funds separate from your applications and your funds, then that's where you would have multiple organizations. But if you're just one organization, then more than likely you're only going to have one organization here. Anytime you set up a user account, anytime you create an application, anytime you create a fund, you've probably noticed sponsoring organization. You'll see that where it asks the sponsoring organization. That's the organization responsible for maintaining that specific functionality. Manage site settings, we're going to skip for a minute, and because that's the majority of the site settings that we set, but I'm going to jump down through here and kind of get through some of these, and then we'll go back to that. So manage fiscal years is an important setting. This is your fiscal year for your site. This is the grant site, the manage fiscal years. Scholarship site, it's going to be manage academic years. So if I click on it, same functionality you'll see. But what this is when we build an application, and applications all have funding sources tied to them. And so the fund source and the application academic year has to be the same dates in order for the system to say, okay, this application was used to award blank funds. And it looks at that academic fiscal year date. It looks at that date. It's very important in the system to get the dates in sync. So this is your start date of your fiscal year, this is the end date of your fiscal period, and then this is the academic year, what you call it, 16-17, or just the 2017 period. Or do you call it, what is it that you normally call that specific fiscal period, academic period? And then this is the start date, this is the end date, and then when you create your application, the system looks at the begin date of the application and the end date of the application, and then that's how it determines which fiscal period or academic year it's going to pick up in regards to the awarding as well. And then when you tie the application to the award, it's going to say, okay, it's this fiscal year. Now, a lot of times you may be taking applications in one period, but the awarding is in another. You can manually adjust that on the application, but the system uses these dates to determine the initial period. It'll give you a period, but you can also override that as well. Okay, so that's where those dates are coming from. Manage password policy. So right now the system, you can have, if it's turned off, then it's just a regular, they can create any password they want, but you do have the ability here, if you want to make a more complex process for their passwords, you can. By simply saying yes to this policy, you can go in and then adjust it accordingly. You can say it has to be so many, so many characters. Maybe you want it to become complex with a combination of uppercase, lowercase. You would say yes to this. Maybe you don't want them to use dictionary words. So you could say no, they can't use a word that's from the dictionary as a password, like cat or dog or something. You want them to be something complex with a combination of maybe that word and numbers. And then also, maybe you don't want them to use their name in their passwords. So anything from their login information, their first name, their last name, their email, then you would adjust that as well. So it's just a matter of turning this on and then filling out the parameters. Very self-explanatory. Lockout duration, that might be one you might not understand, but that would be if they were trying to log in, how many attempts before they're locked out. And then once they are locked out, how long are they to be locked out? That's the threshold here. And then of course, anytime you make a change, you always hit save. External single sign-on, that's only used if you have integration with single sign-on, and this is something that we will assist you with in setting up here. The CommunityForce team will set that up with your technical team for single sign-on. That's when they're coming into your site, signing in, and then being directed to our site. Search filters is used when you have multiple applications live at the same time, multiple meaning 10, 20, 30 applications, and you want to set search parameters for them to be able to search for specific funding before they even start to apply. This is before they're applying. This isn't search filters in regards to once they've applied and they're being matched. This is all these applications are on your site. What are some search filters they can use to quickly access those applications instead of scrolling through pages and pages? We do have a separate training on that as well. Status details, how to set those up. These are used in the manage application process. And any of the application process, you have statuses where the system automatically moves the applicant from like submitted to pending submission to under committee review. Those are statuses in our system. We are predefining those statuses. You can't change those. But you may have other steps in your process, which are status details, we call them on our site. When you get into other training sessions, you'll see you can filter on status details. You can send emails based on status details when you're looking at reports. And so if you want to create your own list, manage status details is where you would do that. It comes when you get your site. You'll probably have about 10, maybe 20 already on there. If you want to, you might want to edit the ones that are there first. You would want to do that before you start using them, because if you change them, it's going to change them on everything you've used already. But if you want to edit the default ones, you can just come here and edit them. And then it's just a matter of coming in, changing the information, just typing over it and clicking save and exit. You can deactivate ones, like if you get that list and you realize, I'm not using these anymore. I don't want to see this long list of statuses. I only want to see certain ones. You can come here and say yes and deactivate those as well. But it is a matter of making sure that you come here, make your changes, and then make sure you hit save or save and exit. And then the sort order is the order that this item falls in this list. So if you want to put this in, if you want to create status details and you want to do it according to your processes, the different steps of your processes that the applicants are moving to, then you can come here and adjust that sort number, and that'll make it number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. So here's the sort order here. You can see some of these are active and some of these are not. So as you get into more training, you'll see where status details come into play, and this is where you would create those status details. If you want to create your own, you can just come here and click add, and then it's just a matter of filling in the information. What do you want it to say? What's the purpose of it? Where do you want it to be in the sort order? Make sure you activate it so it's in the list, and then just hit save and exit to complete the creation. Set master application template. So anytime we at CommunityForce create applications for you, you're going to see a master template. The master template is going to have all of the sections and all the questions for all your application forms. That's where when we start building, we probably have a conversation with you in regards to, okay, what are some, if you have multiple applications, what are some common denominators? Let's build this application so that each application has some of the same fields in them. You know, if there's fields that are repetitious in each application, let's build it all based off of the master template. And then if you ever need to make a change, you can go to the master template, and then an XML name that we give it will be built in the master template, and then that'll allow you to push data through. Master template is also important when creating institutional reports and the global reports. It's looking at the XML based off of what it was originally built in the master template. So we always set that for you when we build. We create a master template, and then this is where we tell the system what that master template is. If you ever come in here and change that master template, then all of the applications that were built on the original, of course, may break, and you won't be able to have that correct XML name. It may not be looking at the same information, so that is something you want to use caution. Now we have this global assign application funds. Now what this does, this is the same as assign application funds in the individual application. But what this does is, this is for a one-to-many application. So if you don't have a one-to-many application, this is going to have no meaning to you. But in a one-to-many, you have one application, multiple funds tied to it. And so you may have several applications live that you want to do that with. You can come here, pick an application, put the funds, assign the funds to it, go down, pick another application, assign the funds to it. It's the exact same process as is in the, when you're building an application fund, here in application settings, assign application funds. The only difference is this one is only letting me assign to this application. The one in the administration dashboard is letting you assign to multiple applications. Where'd it go? I lost it. Bear with me here. Global assign. It lets you do it for multiple applications. You select the application up here. Global Notification Center. The Global Notification Center is the same as in the application itself. When you go into the application, you have a notification center. This is where all the email templates for this one application are housed. However, in the administration version, the Global Notification Center gives you access to more than one application at a time. Maybe I want to look at the templates for that one. Or maybe there's one in this application and I don't want to have to go out and come back in. Maybe I want to take a template here, grab it, copy it, and then go to another application, open up that same one, and then paste in the changes. That's a quick way that you can do that. That's the global notification. It allows you to select different applications all in one screen here. That's the difference between the two. And then also on the Global Notification Center, if I go to select, this is where those email templates are when you create a password for someone, or someone that forgot password. When they click the forgot password, where's that email? How do I change that? If you don't like the message that they're getting, maybe you want to change it. This is where that email is located. Those are those system global templates that aren't tied to any application form. That's why they're here in the global. There's no application form they're tied to because it's coming from the system. And that's these four right here are ones that you have ability to change the message on. If you're using a referral process, this Manage Global Applicant Referrals is the same as the Manage Referrals on the individual application. If you are using referrals, there is a separate training on Manage Referrals that you might want to look at if you are using the referral process. But the Manage Referrals is the same as the Manage Referrals on the individual application, there's this manage applicant referrals. Only difference on the administration version is it, again, instead of just looking at one application, it's going to give you the referrals for multiple application forms. So you can see here there's multiple application forms listed here, and then all the referrals for that referral process. And again, there is a separate training on that. Okay, this next one here, this manage application section mapping, this is something that we here in CommunityForce, this is a functionality that you more than likely aren't using. And again, if it's something you are using, we will assist you in setting that up. So if you are using that, that'll be something that we will assist you in. And if you are using it, you'll know what it does is it creates statuses based on rules that push data to auto create applicant accounts and other applications. So it's a special means of pushing data from one application to another. And so if you are using that functionality, we would assist you with that. And that is something we usually determine in your process review based on your processes, whether or not that is something you need. And if you do, then we'll go over that with you. And then role types, that's where the admin account roles and the applicant roles, reviewer roles, access is all configured. That is something that we at CommunityForce do for you as well. Because of the licensing, you don't want to create any role types that are in the scope of licensing, because that is against contract and licensing rules. Manage control labels is nice. Manage control labels are all the labels. So these are the labels. These are control labels. These are control labels. Manage control labels allows you to change the names of these. So if you want to change the names of these, you're welcome to do so. Do note, though, you may want to keep track of what the old name was, because whatever you change the name to, and if you try to do a support ticket and it's a name we don't know what it's about, you might want to do a support ticket based on the actual original name. Also, you'll notice as I hover here, the items in yellow there, that's help text. And so you also can actually change the information in that help text. There's little icons here. You can also change the icons on those. So to do that, it's very simple. It's a matter of just coming here, clicking edit, and then it'll open up the fields. And maybe you don't want this to say applications module. Maybe you want it to say something else. You just come in here, make the change. If you want to change the help text, you can do that. You can select the icon if you want to change the icon. And then you just come down here to the bottom of the page, scroll down, and hit save. I'm going to hit cancel. And it'll make that change. It's that simple. And that will change the name of that specific label. And then once it's closed like this, you know that it's made that change. Okay, so that's manage control labels. Manage system messages. No doubt there are times when you've seen messages pop up and it'll say, you know, this application's been saved, or warning, you know, don't delete this, or something to that extent. If you know the code, usually when you see those messages, it will pop up a code. All of those messages are located here. This screen does allow you to edit those messages. Maybe you don't like the verbiage of that message. You can come here. If you know the code, you can come here, search for that code, or go through the list. You can do that as well. Search for it, and then once you find it, either go through the list or search for it. There's this little icon here to edit it. And then this is the type. You would want to keep that the same because that's hard-coded in our system. But this description right here is where you can change that. One word of caution is you may see some of these. Let me see if I can find one here. Here's one. This one here has a bracket around it. That is actually a merge field. So if you were to take this and edit it and remove this it would no longer merge with the application name. So every time that message pops up right now, no matter where it is, if you have multiple applications, that's picking up the application name from application to application. So if you remove that, that will no longer be in there. So that's one caution if you are going to edit these. If it has brackets around it, don't touch it, leave it there. File upload is something we here at CommunityForce do. More than likely you don't have this on your site, but a lot of times we have documents and you want to create a URL. You can give us the document. We'll upload that to the site, and then it'll give us a URL, and then we can embed that URL into the text of that, like a question, or into the text of instructional information. But that's where, and then they can click it, and then it would take them to that document if they needed to. And so that sometimes we capture those from you. Sometimes, depending on when we're creating a question, there's another way to do this. But if it's text in like maybe an application setting, a description or something like that, a document in that manage applications fund setup instructions, we might need to have a URL that directs us to that document. And then plugin mapping is a functionality we will assist you with. This is when anytime we have a plugin where we're integrating with something, this is where we would set that up. And so if there's some type of an integration that CommunityForce is integrating with a product of yours, of like maybe Salesforce, for example, or so like here integrating with Salesforce, this is where we would plug in that up. But this is something that CommunityForce would do, not something that you would need to set up, but CommunityForce would be setting that up. But this is where that's housed. And then global notification, this is before any applications are built. These are the notification templates that come pre-designed on the site. And before we build an application, if we come here and we change the template, then once we create a brand new application using the create, not a clone, but a create application, this is where then we could update, and it would pick up that updated version before it was into the application form. Okay, so that's the key settings. And of course, I did say we're going to save manage site settings for the end. So manage site settings are very crucial settings for the setup of your site. And as I mentioned a minute ago, when we do your onboarding application where you fill out the onboarding form and we're gathering your documentation, we're going to be asking some of those key questions that help us know how to set up your site. This is where we set up the site, and it is actually partitioned off into different sections. And so here in organization, of course, this is where we put your name. This is where we upload the logo. This is where we tell the system, are you a grant user or are you a scholarship user? Do not touch site behavior, because individual, that means you're a you're a scholarship user. Individual is for scholarships only. If I go to the grant site, you'll see when I log in here, it's organizations. If you change this button, that's why we say do not touch it. If you change this, your site will change from a scholarship to a grant. You will lose all your grant data. And vice versa, scholarships, if you change this to organizations, you're going to lose your scholarship functionality and it'll be a grant system. So do not touch that. That's what the system, that's how we tell the system how that is. And then general settings are some of the key ones. What type of currency do you use? What's your time zone? You can kind of see some of them here. When someone comes to your site, what's the pages? Are they going to see a login page? Are they going to see the applications list? Are they going to see a search page? That's where you can see all of these settings are here. If for any reason you want to change your color scheme, this is the site theme. Click here. And then this is where we set that color scheme down here. This is just an example. This is not your site. This is just an example. You can see it's just these Latin terms, but this is just because it's for example purposes only, but this is where you can put in your hex values for your graphics and enter that information, and then that would make the changes on your screen here. That's where that theme comes from. That's where we set that color scheme on your site settings. Let me cancel. I'm just going to hit site settings here to go back. Okay, so you can kind of see some of those, all of these here. There is a user's guide that explains these in more detail, step by, of each one and what the functionality is, but you can just kind of see this is some of those key settings. A lot of times, here's a key one that we set up. Where's it at? The submittal one. Send email to application contact when an application is submitted. So anytime an application is submitted, this set right now is turned on. Whoever the application contact is, so when we build the application, the general information, we add the individual who's responsible for maintaining that application. That's the application contact. So you would get an email every time a student submits. That's some of the functionalities that you can see here. But again, there is a user guide that goes into more detail on each one of the site settings and when they're turned off and on, what do they cause the system to do. Remember, site settings means entire site is affected. Anything you make a change on, it's going to affect every application of your site, not just one application, but the entire site. Referrals, if you are using that manage referrals, like I talked about, this is where we would activate those settings. Reviewer screen settings, your review process, there's certain settings that we'll set for you in regards to the review process. How do you want them to see the application form? Do you want them to be able to have their scores when they're viewing applicants over and over again, pushing scores? Do you want them to have a submit button? Different settings like that. How long do you want their auto save to be set at? That's for the review process only. When creating your funding sources, so here in the, see if I can get this to scroll, this manage application funds, we have standard settings that you have to that you can complete when creating a fund setup, when setting up the fund, but maybe you want to capture some more information. And so here you can activate these fields. You have 20 different fields. You have some essay boxes, some date fields, some numeric, some text boxes, some drop downs. Maybe you want to create some additional items you want to capture in that fund. So when you create a new fund, maybe you want to activate some items to capture some more information. You can do so here. And then in the label, what do you call your fund? Some people call them scholarships. Some people call them grants. Some people call them fellowships. We call it funding. It'd be very generic. So when you see anywhere that has to do with funding, so this is manage application funds. Maybe you want it to be, when you get into that screen, you want it to say manage scholarships. This is where you would make that change so that it would be what you call your fund. And then if you are capturing donor information, you might want to enable this. This will allow you to capture the donor name of that fund and also the email address of that donor. And then who's the contact? That would be, that would show where you could enter a contact, just like the application contact, who's the admin internally that's responsible for maintaining this fund. You add a fund contact. And then that'll also show on that description page, it'll say please contact, and it'll have that information there as well. And then for really complex clients, some of them have funds and they have all these different role types. We have different admins, and each admin can only maintain a certain type of a fund. There's ways to set that up too. But of course, remember these site settings are something that we'll capture usually at the very beginning of the build, the major ones, and then some of these, if you want to like activate some of them, you're welcome to do so. But remember, this affects your entire site. So you would want to review that guide on site settings before you started changing any site settings. External system settings, that works in relationship with integration. So we in CommunityForce would be setting that up to create that integration piece. The same with the Active Directory LDAP settings. Those are also with integration to external sites, external software, something that we at CommunityForce would be setting up. Manage award settings. When awarding your applicants, there's two different orientations on the Manage Awards multiple funds. The majority of our clients use the scholarship grant specific. Now that's only for applicants or clients that have a one-to-many application process. So if you have that, you know what we're talking about. One-to-one, you have one application, one fund. One-to-many, you have one application, multiple funds. And so when you're doing the awarding and your manage awards multiple funds, that's what this affects, manage awards multiple funds. Right now when you click on it, you see a listing of each of your funds, and then you open each fund and you can see who matched to it. Applicant specific changes that listing to where you see the applicants. You can then click on each applicant and see the applications they match to. Majority of our clients use the scholarship grant specific. So that's why we don't get into much to the applicant specific. But if that's something you wanted to revert to, we can change that setting. But no, it affects every single one of your applications, not just any app, just one application. It's every application will now be showing the applicant specific setting. And then also on the award screen, if you were in that award training, on the Manage Awards Multiple Funds, you can activate custom fields. You'll know that these are fields, so when you click that award applicant button, add award, and that screen pops up, you might want to activate additional fields where you want to capture additional information. You don't want just their award, final award, initial award. You don't want a comment field. Maybe you want to add some additional fields. You can add those by activating these, same as the fund setup. You can activate these, and then this is a text box, this is a date field, these are essay boxes, this is a drop down. You can activate these and name them what you want to, and then if it's these drop downs, you can add the values that you wish. You'll notice how it kind of separates them with the little tildes for each individual change of value. But you can come here and say yes and activate these, and then these would be present when you do the award. These would be additional fields that you can capture additional data. And then know that when you do ad hoc reports, that these custom fields, if you've activated them, can be included in those ad hoc reports. That's the award custom fields, not the scholarship funds or the fund setup fields that are located up here. Those aren't in reports, but these would be in reports. If you select in your ad hoc report award information, it would include this information in that report. And then some instructional areas that will look familiar to you. Some of the key ones, the welcome page. This is where those instructions are to that welcome page. If you're using the search page, this is that thank you for joining. You'll see that if you click search for something and that search page is active, this is where those instructions are. Login instructions, that's your welcome page. That's where those instructions are. And then when they click the create account, the instructions in the create account, that's these right here. And if you have terms and conditions activated, that's this location here. If you're using the interest cart, most of our universities sometimes use this interest cart. That's the instructions. And then this ineligible students fund message, this is in regards with integration. So this is if you have integration coming from one site to another, then a lot of times this is a message notifying applicants depending on how they're logging in, if they're eligible or not. And then if you know anything about your, you want to direct people to your site and you want to use Google Analytics scripts, or you've got some meta keywords and descriptions that you want to set up. If you have a marketing person then knows how to use those, then they can come in here and they can set those up for you to direct people to your site in this marketing and advertisement section. And then of course, anytime you make a change on the site settings, you do want to come here and click save, and that will save the site settings for you. So that is pretty much the administration tab and all the functionality that's located under that administration tab. Some of the key areas that all of our clients touch in some way or shape or form. And then of course, anything that we didn't cover, there's usually a user's guide, or it's something that CommunityForce, depending on the discussion we have in regards to your processes, then we would be setting those settings up for you. But we do just kind of like to give you an overview so you know where those are. And if you want to look and see what did we set it as, you can always come in here and see that as well. So I hope this gave you a good overview of that, and this will end our training session on the administration dashboard. So I thank you very much for your time, and you all have a very wonderful day.